The millionaire is hitting my mama. It pierced through the night like a lightning strike. The cry of a child, not loud enough to stop the storm, but strong enough to change it. For a second, nothing followed. Just the echo, bouncing down the narrow street, colliding with shuttered windows and glass walls, haunting the air between thunderclaps. Then the sound of engines died. Across the street, under a neon sign buzzing half alive, a row of motorcycles sat lined in perfect formation. 6 men stood beside them, dark jackets, wet boots, and eyes that had seen too much of the world to believe in coincidence. Their laughter stilled. The storm kept speaking, but the night itself seemed to hold its breath. Marcus looked up first. The leader. Tall. Shoulders broad under his drenched leather. The kind of man whose silence carried more weight than another man's shouting. His gloved hands froze on his helmet. For a moment, even the rain seemed afraid to touch him. He turned his head slightly, listening. Another sound came. Soft this time, a whimper breaking into a whisper. Please help my mama. Marcus lifted the helmet from his head. The streetlight caught the faint scar near his brow, a reminder of battles he never spoke about. Water ran down his face in thin lines, dripping from his jaw to the pavement below. Did you hear that? Dallas murmured behind him. Marcus didn't answer. His eyes were already scanning the shadows, the glistening sidewalks, the slope that led up to the gated hill beyond. Through the blur of rain, he saw it. The silhouette of a mansion. Large, untouched, lit from within. The kind of place where suffering was meant to stay behind closed doors. He exhaled slowly. It came from there. Holden followed his gaze. That's Landon's estate, he said quietly. The millionaire. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Figures. The storm rumbled above them. The streetlight buzzed again, casting a flicker across their faces. The crew shifted uneasily, but Marcus didn't move. He stood anchored, the sound of that small voice still echoing somewhere deep inside him, a sound that didn't belong to strangers, but to memory. He remembered once being too late to stop a cry just like it. That kind of regret never left a man. He clenched his jaw, sliding the helmet under his arm, every muscle in his body coiled tight. Lightning struck. The sky opened wider, and up there beyond the rain, behind those gleaming glass walls, a woman flinched. Inside the mansion, the world smelled of polish, wine, and control. The chandelier burned gold above a table long enough to seat kings. The floor, white marble, spotless, cold. The only sound was the faint clink of a glass being set too softly down. Justine stood near the edge of the dining room after she wiped her face, her apron damp, her hands red from detergent and work. Her posture was perfect, trained. Shoulders down, head lowered, eyes never daring to meet another's. Faster, said a voice. She froze. At the head of the table, Landon sat like he owned gravity itself. His suit was pressed, his drink untouched, the kind of man whose presence filled a room like smoke, poisonous but invisible until it choked you. Yes, sir, Justine murmured. Her voice was low, stripped of everything that once made it soft. She reached to refill his glass. Her hand trembled, just once. A drop spilled. Red wine streaked across the white tablecloth. Landon's jaw tightened. His gaze lifted slowly, deliberate, cruel. I said faster, not clumsy. I'm sorry, sir. The glass struck the edge of the table and toppled. The sound of shattering crystal echoed through the hall. She flinched, but she didn't scream. Not yet. He stood, the scrape of his chair louder than the thunder outside. You think this house pays you to make messes? No, sir. He stepped closer. The air shifted. His hand twitched, and the world shrank to the space between them, to the moment every bruise begins in silence. But she didn't move. She didn't beg. Her eyes stayed fixed on the floor, on the reflection of herself. Small, distorted, unrecognizable. Her voice trembled. It won't happen again. He smiled without warmth. You're right. It won't. He turned away, sipping his drink, the storm outside flashing against the windows. She stayed still until he left the room. Then she exhaled shakily, pressing one hand to her chest. The beating beneath it was frantic, the body's quiet rebellion. For a moment, she dared to glance toward the window. The rain smeared her reflection into something ghost-like. Far below, beyond the hill, a faint vibration hummed through the glass, engines idling, waiting, listening. She didn't know it yet, but someone had already heard the cry she thought would vanish into the storm. Outside, Marcus's grip tightened around his helmet. He could still hear that small voice, not through his ears anymore, but somewhere deeper, somewhere a man doesn't forget. Rain coursed over his boots, pooling on the pavement, distorting the neon glow at his feet. The others waited, saying nothing, watching the quiet shift inside him. Dallas broke the silence first. Boss? Marcus didn't look at him. His eyes were still on the mansion lights, the gold squares glowing like arrogance behind the rain. Someone up there's bleeding, he said finally, his voice almost a whisper. And the city's pretending it can't hear it. Thunder cracked above them. He slid his helmet back on, the movement slow, deliberate. The visor came down, hiding his expression, but not the intent burning behind it. The night had called, and Marcus wasn't the kind of man who ignored a cry for help. If this story already touched your heart, please subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss the next one, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing how far our little storytelling family reaches. Morning came without kindness. The rain had stopped, but its ghost lingered in the air, damp, heavy, clinging to the windows like regret. Inside the mansion, light spilled through the tall glass panes, turning every drop on the floor into a mirror. The world outside was gold and clean. The world inside was not. Justine moved through the silence like a shadow no one wanted to see. Her hands were raw, red at the knuckles, the skin cracked from bleach and soap. The smell of detergent clung to her hair, to her breath, to the life she was trying to hold together. The mop bucket sloshed as she dragged it across the marble. Her reflection followed her, a blurred shape of fatigue and quiet obedience. Each movement was deliberate, rehearsed. Bend, scrub, rinse. Again. Always again. A rosary dangled from her wrist, silver dulled from years of use. One bead was missing near the center, lost somewhere between yesterday's prayers and today's exhaustion. She noticed it each time her hand turned, and each time she whispered the same thing beneath her breath. Give me strength. At the back of the service corridor, a small door opened to a narrow storage room where a single child's voice hummed off-key. Teresa sat on the floor, knees tucked under her chin, coloring on the back of an old invoice. The wax of the crayon had worn down to its paper shell, but she didn't mind. Her tongue poked between her teeth in concentration as she drew tall towers and bright suns that never existed in her world. Justine peeked through the doorway. You hungry, sweetheart? Teresa looked up, eyes the color of morning after rain, soft but too wise for 6 years old. A little, she whispered. Her mother smiled faintly, setting down a slice of bread wrapped in tissue. Eat slow. We'll have supper later. Teresa nodded and held out her picture. This is you, Mama, see? You're smiling. Justine's breath caught. The stick figure wore a big circle for a head and a smaller one beside it. Both were holding hands. Who's that next to me? That's me, Teresa said proudly. We're outside, not here. For a moment, Justine forgot the ache in her back. It's beautiful, baby. I'm going to draw another one tomorrow, Teresa said softly. When we live somewhere where nobody yells. Justine's throat tightened. She kissed the top of her daughter's head, then stood quickly before tears could fall where Teresa might see them. She couldn't let her see. Not the cracks. Not the truth. The heavy voice came from the hall. "Justine!" She stiffened. The echo of her name bounced through the walls. She placed a finger to her lips, silently begging her daughter to stay quiet. "Yes, sir," she called, forcing steadiness into her tone. When she stepped back into the main corridor, Landon was already waiting. Silk tie perfect, cufflinks shining like polished cruelty. He didn't look at her so much as through her, as though she were part of the decor. "The study floor still streaks," he said. "I can see your reflection, but it's not clear enough." "I'll redo it, sir." "See that you do." His gaze drifted to her sleeves. "And cover those bruises next time. They make the staff look untidy." She swallowed. "Yes, sir." He adjusted his watch and turned away. "Investors are coming tonight. If anything embarrasses me, you'll regret it." "Yes, sir." When he left, the silence that followed felt heavier than his voice. Justine pressed her hand to her arm where his eyes had lingered. The bruise beneath the fabric throbbed faintly, a secret heartbeat of pain that she carried like debt. She turned back to the bucket, but the mop slipped from her hands and clattered against the tile. The sound startled her, sharp and metallic. She froze, waiting, listening. Nothing. No footsteps. No anger. Still, she whispered, "Please, God, not today." The mansion stretched around her. High ceilings, expensive art, walls painted the color of wealth. Everything gleamed, everything shone, everything lied. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the squeak of rubber soles and the rhythm of scrubbing. The smell of polish filled her lungs until it burned. Every mirror she cleaned reflected a version of her she no longer recognized. She had once been different, a woman who laughed easily, who danced with her husband in their tiny kitchen when Teresa was a baby. But the world had a way of erasing joy slowly. One bill, one bruise, one silence at a time. Now she lived behind doors that never opened for kindness. When she reached the end of the hallway, she leaned against the wall, the cool marble pressing against her spine. She shut her eyes and let her breath tremble. For a few seconds, she imagined the sea, something wide and clean where the air didn't smell of bleach. She used to dream of taking Teresa there just once to watch the waves break like forgiveness against the shore. Then the illusion cracked. Landon's voice again, muffled from another room, barking orders at someone unseen. She straightened immediately, picking up her mop. Her back screamed in protest, but she didn't slow down. She couldn't. Because in this house, hesitation was rebellion. By late afternoon, the windows caught the sunset, painting gold streaks across the floor she'd just polished. The mansion glowed with warmth that wasn't meant for her. She stood by the staircase, watching the light move across the room. It was beautiful, in the same way a fire is beautiful before it burns everything it touches. Behind her, Teresa's voice drifted from the storage room again, soft and sleepy. "Mama? Yes, baby? Do rich people ever get sad?" Justine hesitated, her hand still on the mop handle. "Everyone gets sad, sweetheart. But they have everything." She smiled faintly, though her heart ached. "Sometimes people with everything forget what to be thankful for." Teresa yawned. "Then I hope we never forget." Justine turned her head toward the window, where the last of the sun sank behind the city skyline. "Me too, baby. Me too." She touched her rosary again, fingers finding the missing bead, the gap that never seemed to close. She thought of her husband, gone too soon, and whispered a prayer not for miracles but for endurance. Outside, the first drops of evening rain began to fall again, tracing the glass like tears. Inside, Justine kept working, unseen, unthanked, a quiet heartbeat behind the mansion's perfection. She didn't know it yet, but that night would end differently. The marble that gleamed now would soon be stained by the truth no one wanted to see, and the voice of her daughter, small, fierce, unbreakable, would echo beyond these walls before the dawn. Would you still endure in silence if your endurance became your daughter's pain? The mansion glowed that night like a jewel trapped in glass. Rain licked the windows again, tracing silver veins across their perfect surface. Inside, laughter rose and fell like the clinking of champagne, smooth, hollow, rehearsed. Justine stood by the dining table, invisible in her black uniform, her presence melting into the background of crystal chandeliers and polished marble. Her apron was pressed, her hair pinned neatly. Every movement was measured, graceful, the result of years of learning how not to be noticed. She placed a decanter of wine beside Landon's hand. The smell of roasted lamb and truffle butter filled the air, but it only made her stomach tighten. The laughter around her was expensive, the kind that bought itself permission to be cruel. Landon's voice cut through the hum. "To success," he said, raising his glass, "and to those who know their place in the world." The men around the table laughed, their suits whispering against silk chairs. Justine bowed her head slightly, retreating to the edge of the room. But one of the investors, a man with rings too large for his fingers, leaned toward Landon. "Your staff is well trained, I'll give you that," he said, smirking. "Quiet little things." Landon chuckled, proud of the insult that wasn't meant as one. "Discipline breeds perfection." The words burned as they reached her ears, but Justine didn't look up. She gripped the wine bottle tighter and stepped forward again, refilling glasses with the precision of a machine. That was when it happened. One tremor of her hand, one heartbeat too fast. The bottle tilted too sharply. A stream of red spilled down the edge of Landon's glass, splattering his sleeve and blooming across his ivory suit like blood. The sound of laughter died instantly. Wine dripped from his cuff. The crimson spread, bright and merciless, until it seemed the whole room was watching it bleed. "Justine," he said softly. Too softly. She froze. I'm sorry, sir." He stood, slowly, deliberately. His chair groaned against the marble. "Do you have any idea what this suit costs?" "I'll clean it right away." He moved before she could finish. The slap cracked through the room like thunder. The force sent her stumbling backward, one hand flying to her cheek. The sting bloomed instantly, hot, humiliating, real. A gasp rippled through the table, but no one stood. No one spoke. Her breath came in small, broken sounds. She didn't cry. Not yet. But her eyes glistened with the kind of pain that begged for privacy. Landon adjusted his cuff, his composure unbroken. "That," he said coldly, "is what happens when you forget your place." Silence swallowed the room. Even the rain seemed to hesitate against the windows. Then someone coughed awkwardly, and conversation limped back to life, as if violence was a brief inconvenience. Justine turned away, her vision blurring. Her heart pounded so loud she could barely hear. The chandelier above swayed faintly with the wind, scattering light across her tears. She pressed her sleeve to her cheek, hiding the swelling red mark. Her gaze flicked toward the hallway. The cracked door, a sliver of light, and within it, two small eyes. Teresa. Her daughter's little hands clutched the edge of the doorframe, knuckles white. Her face was pale, eyes wide with confusion and fear. "Mama?" Justine's lips parted, but no sound came. She shook her head faintly, pleading with her eyes for silence. Landon's voice cut through again. "Who's there?" Justine turned instantly. "No one, sir. I'll see to the mess." But the damage was done. Teresa saw everything. The slap, the stillness, the way her mother didn't fight back. And in a 6-year-old's heart, something broke. And that was when she ran. The hallway outside was colder. The air smelled of polish and rain leaking through the old windows. Teresa ran, bare feet slapping against marble, heart racing faster than the storm outside. She pushed through the side door, into the downpour. The rain met her like a wall, drenching her instantly, but she didn't stop. She ran through the garden, through the gates that had always stayed locked until tonight. Thunder rolled across the sky as her voice tore through the night. "Somebody help, please!" The mansion lights glowed behind her like a monster's eyes. The millionaire is hitting my mama!" she screamed, her voice breaking with every word. Down the street, in the same spot where the engines slept the night before, a motorcycle hummed to life. Marcus heard it. He looked up sharply. A voice again, a small voice, desperate, loud. He came down from his bike, the clatter echoing through the alley. "Boss?" Dallas called from inside. But Marcus was already running. He stepped into the street, boots splashing through puddles, scanning the shadows until he saw her. A tiny figure in soaked pajamas, hair plastered to her face, trembling from more than just the cold. He slowed as he approached, removing his helmet. "Hey," he said softly, kneeling so his voice wouldn't scare her. "Hey, sweetheart. What happened?" Teresa's sobs came in hiccups, her breath catching between words. He hurt her. My mama." Marcus's eyes flicked toward the hill where the mansion loomed, its windows flickering gold behind the rain. His jaw tightened. "Who?" he asked gently. "The man in the big house," she cried. "The millionaire." He brushed a wet strand of hair from her forehead, his movements careful. "You're safe now, okay? You did the right thing coming out here." She pointed toward the gates with a trembling hand. "Please, help her." Marcus stood slowly, his leather jacket glistening with rain, his expression hardening into resolve. The storm began to roar again, as if it, too, had chosen a side. He looked back once at the girl, then toward the mansion's lights, cold, unfeeling, distant. The engines of his crew rumbled to life one by one, a chorus of thunder answering the storm. "Stay here," Marcus said quietly, his voice a promise. "No one hurts your mama again." He pulled his helmet on, visor snapping shut. The night crackled with tension. Somewhere behind him, Teresa whispered through her tears, "Please, bring her back." Marcus revved the engine. The sound shattered the silence. Rain exploded off the road as the first bike surged forward toward the hill. The storm had begun, not just in the sky, but in the heart of a man who'd heard enough cries to know when one was meant for him. The storm had returned wilder than before. Thunder cracked against the heavens like anger uncontained. Rain lashed at the earth, bouncing off the pavement, filling the gutters with rushing silver. Marcus's engine roared through it all. The headlight cut a streak of light through the darkness, slicing toward the hill like a blade aimed at arrogance. Behind him, 2 more bikes followed, Dallas and Holden, their engines merging into one furious growl that made the night tremble. At the mansion's gates, the world seemed to hold its breath. The wrought iron bars glistened black and gold under the lightning. The emblem of the millionaire's estate, a golden lion, glared down from the center. Marcus didn't slow. The front tire hit the gate and the metal shuddered under the force of his kick. The chain snapped. The gate swung open with a scream that echoed across the valley. Inside, the gravel sprayed under spinning wheels as the bikers tore into the driveway. Water splashed against the marble steps, thunder clapping above them like applause for the inevitable. Landon appeared in the doorway, half-buttoned shirt, glass of wine still in hand, arrogance painted across his face. Behind him, golden light spilled from the chandelier, revealing the chaos inside. Broken glass, tipped chairs, the ghost of violence still lingering in the air. He laughed. Actually laughed, as Marcus dismounted, pulling off his helmet. "You must be lost," Landon said coolly, his tone laced with venomous amusement. "The nearest bar is 3 miles east." Marcus didn't answer. The rain fell between them like a curtain of fire. His eyes, dark beneath the stormlight, locked on Justine, standing frozen at the top of the stairs, her cheeks swollen, her hands shaking around the edge of her apron. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to her trembling figure and the bruise that shouldn't have existed. "Who are you?" Landon demanded, stepping forward. "Who sent you?" Marcus dropped his gloves into the puddle at his feet. "No one," he said, his voice calm, steady, deadly. "I came because someone screamed." Landon scoffed, tilting his head toward the rain. You think you can barge into my property because of some gutter noise? Marcus took a step closer, boots grinding on the gravel. A child's voice isn't noise. Lightning flashed. For an instant, the world turned white. Landon's smirk faltered, but only for a second. He lifted his chin, the air of superiority never breaking. You have no idea who you're talking to. Oh, I do, Marcus said quietly. A man who thinks his money makes him untouchable. The millionaire's jaw tightened. Leave now, before I call security. There's no security strong enough to protect a coward, Marcus said. From the doorway, Justine's voice trembled through the storm. Stop, please, please, you'll make it worse. Her eyes darted between them, the man she served, and the stranger who'd come like thunder to her defense. She clutched the rosary on her wrist. Its single missing bead glinted faintly in the lightning. Please, she whispered again, stepping forward, the rain reaching her feet. Just go. Marcus turned to her, his expression softening for a heartbeat. He hit you? He said, not as a question but as a truth carved from fire. Justine flinched. Her lips parted, but words wouldn't come. Landon's laugh broke the silence. You see? She knows her place. You should learn yours. That was when Marcus took off his jacket, the leather heavy with rain, and tossed it aside. The tattoo on his forearm caught the light. Protect the weak. He stepped forward, close enough that his boots met the edge of the marble steps. No one hits a woman while I'm breathing, he said, voice low, fierce, steady enough to still the storm itself. Landon's grip tightened around his glass. Get out. Marcus didn't move. Make me. The tension snapped like a wire. Landon threw the glass. It shattered near Marcus's feet, shards scattering into the rain. Dallas and Holden shifted, ready to move, but Marcus lifted a hand. No, not yet. Landon's anger began to fray at the edges. Do you have any idea how many men I could bury you with? Marcus stepped closer, his voice quiet but filled with something that made even thunder hesitate. Do you have any idea how many ghosts follow me already? Justine gasped softly. Landon's bravado cracked, just slightly, under the weight of that tone. The storm intensified. The wind howled through the open gates like a warning from the heavens themselves. Inside the mansion, Teresa's drawing, the one she made of her smiling mother, lay forgotten on the floor, the ink smudged by wet footprints. The child's hope, her small act of light, trembled in the air like the memory of innocence before ruin. Justine saw it. The sight broke something inside her. She turned back to Landon, voice breaking. Please, just let them leave. I'll fix everything. I'll take the blame. Marcus's head snapped toward her. You've taken enough blame for a lifetime, Landon sneered. Listen to him. Your new hero. He reached out, gripping Justine's arm roughly, pulling her closer. Marcus moved instantly. The sharp scrape of boots, the sound of rage given form. His hand clamped around Landon's wrist, twisting it away with brutal precision. Landon cursed, stumbling back, clutching his arm. Marcus's voice dropped into something cold. Touch her again, and I'll forget you're human. Lightning flared behind him, turning his shadow into something larger, something mythic, a guardian born from storm and fury. For a breathless second, no one moved. Then, faintly, came the sound of sirens, distant but growing. Landon's eyes widened. You called the police? Marcus turned his head slightly, rain dripping from his jaw. No, he said, but someone finally did. Justine's eyes darted toward the window, confusion flickering with hope. She hadn't called them. Neither had Marcus. Landon backed away, anger mixing with fear. You think this ends with you? He spat. You'll regret ever stepping onto my property. Marcus took a slow step forward. Maybe, he said quietly, but at least tonight someone heard her cry. The rain began to ease. The sirens grew louder. Justine stood there, trembling, her hands over her heart, unsure whether she was witnessing the start of salvation or another kind of storm. Marcus didn't look back as he faced the mansion's glowing doorway, a world of cruelty that was no longer hidden behind glass. The storm had broken, but something else was only beginning. The mansion pulsed with tension, every polished surface reflecting the storm raging both outside and within. Rain slapped the glass walls like applause from unseen ghosts. Thunder rolled above, echoing the fury that had found its way through the iron gates. Marcus stood inside the foyer now, boots leaving dark prints on marble floors that had never known dirt. His breathing was steady, but his hands flexed at his sides, controlled power waiting for reason to fade. Across from him, Landon wiped rain from his face, the smirk gone. "You've made a mistake," he hissed, voice tight, veins standing out against his neck. "This is my house." Marcus's gaze swept the shattered glass near the door, the fallen bottle of wine bleeding across white marble like an open wound. His voice came low, steady. "Then it's about time someone cleaned it." Landon's nostrils flared. "You think you're a hero? You're just a filthy biker who doesn't understand consequence." Marcus didn't flinch. He stepped closer, every inch of him calm. Too calm. "You're right," he said quietly. "I've seen consequence. It lives on faces like hers." He tilted his head toward Justine, standing half hidden near the stairs. Her hands trembled where they clutched the rail. The bruise on her cheek caught the chandelier light. Purple against pale skin, proof and prophecy both. Landon followed Marcus's gaze and laughed, the sound sharp and ugly. "You don't get to talk about her, she's mine." The words sliced through the air. Mine. Marcus's jaw tightened, the space between them dissolved. When Landon raised his hand, whether in threat or arrogance, Marcus moved like lightning. He caught the wrist midair, twisting it back with precise, effortless strength. The crack of bone and the shatter of the glass in Landon's hand fused into one terrible sound. The wine glass exploded across the floor, shards scattered everywhere, glittering, beautiful, deadly. Landon gasped, shock folding into rage. "You'll regret this." Marcus's voice was quiet enough to make the storm pause. "You think money makes you untouchable." He shoved the man backward. Landon stumbled against the dining table. Crystal toppled, plates crashed to the floor, champagne pooling like tears around his shoes. The guests, investors, acquaintances, people who'd laughed moments before, froze where they stood. No one spoke. No one intervened. The masks of civility cracked with the sound of falling glass. Justine pressed both hands to her mouth. Her heart pounded so loud it drowned everything else. For the first time in years, the man who ruled her life looked small. Marcus turned to her, voice softening but still carved from fire. "It's over. You don't have to take another word from him." She shook her head, breath shallow. "You don't understand. Men like him don't lose." "Everyone loses," Marcus said. "Some just take longer to fall." Then came the sound, faint at first but unmistakable. Sirens. Flashing lights painted the wet windows red and blue. The storm caught their reflection, scattering color through the raindrops. Landon straightened, trying to recover his mask of control. "I told you, you'll regret this." He tried to step forward, but his footing slipped on the wine. "I'll bury you in lawsuits before the night ends." Marcus didn't move. "You already buried yourself." The front doors burst open. 2 officers stepped in, led by Foster, tall, rain-slicked, his badge glinting under the chandelier. His voice filled the room like a verdict. "Landon Creed?" Landon's smile faltered. "Officer? Thank God. Arrest this—" "Not another word," Foster cut in. His tone carried the weight of someone who'd heard too many lies in too many expensive homes. "We received multiple calls. Reports of domestic assault. Step aside." Landon tried to laugh it off. You have no proof. She won't say anything. Then, from behind Marcus, a small voice broke through the thunder. I will. Justine's voice trembled but did not break. She stepped forward, hands still shaking but eyes clear. He hit me. He's been hitting me for months. The words landed like lightning. Landon's head whipped toward her, fury and disbelief mingling. You ungrateful... Marcus moved between them before the word could finish. His tone was ice. You raise that voice again, and you'll need more than money to walk out of here. Foster's partner guided Justine gently toward the doorway, offering her a towel. She held it close, tears cutting paths through the dust on her face. Teresa's name trembled on her lips. My daughter. She's outside. She's safe, Marcus said softly. You'll see her soon. The police moved in. Landon's protests grew frantic, unraveling with every step. You can't do this. I built this city. I know every judge. Then they'll finally know what you are, Foster replied. The storm began to quiet. Rain softened against the windows. The guests slipped away, whispering excuses, desperate to escape the guilt reflected in the marble. Marcus stood near the center of the room, chest rising slowly, eyes fixed on the broken glass beneath his boots. It glittered under the fading chandelier light like stars scattered across a night finally free of clouds. Behind him, Justine stood frozen, unsure what to do with her hands, her body, her freedom. She'd imagined this moment 1,000 times, but never believed it would come. Marcus turned, stepping toward her. Here, he said quietly, shrugging off his leather jacket. The scent of rain and gasoline clung to it, but it carried warmth, safety. He placed it gently over her shoulders. The jacket hung heavy, far too big, but she held it closed like armor. For the first time in years, she felt protected. Not hidden. Protected. Her voice broke into a whisper. Why? Why would you risk all this for someone you don't even know? Marcus met her eyes. Because someone once helped me when I didn't deserve it. She blinked, tears welling again. I don't even know your name. He almost smiled. Marcus. Lightning flickered one last time behind the windows, soft now like the sky exhaling. Justine's lips trembled. Thank you. Marcus looked toward the doorway, where Foster was leading Landon out in handcuffs. Don't thank me, he said. Just don't go back. Outside, the police lights turned the wet driveway into a river of color. The reflection danced across Marcus's boots as he stepped into the rain once more. Behind him, Justine stood at the threshold, his jacket still around her, her fingers brushing the missing bead on her rosary. A single tear fell, not of fear, but release. For the first time, the mansion's windows didn't gleam with pride. They shimmered with truth. The rain had quieted to a drizzle, a faint silver mist over the hill. The once imposing mansion stood still, its windows dim, its glory stripped bare. Only the echo of shattered glass and the pulse of red-blue lights broke the silence. Police cruisers lined the driveway, their reflections flickering across the marble walls like restless spirits. Officers moved through the chaos, collecting statements, taking photographs, whispering codes into radios. Marcus stood near the doorway, drenched and silent. The storm had spent itself, but the air still felt heavy with truth waiting to be spoken. Inside, Landon Creed paced like a caged animal, shouting into the empty air, his voice cracking with a desperation that no longer sounded powerful, only small. You think this means anything? He barked. Do you know who I am? Foster didn't flinch. He was a mountain of calm in the storm's wake. Yes, he said quietly, flipping through his notepad. We do, and so does everyone else. Landon froze, chest heaving, his suit disheveled and damp. His guests, the ones who'd once laughed at his table, now lingered near the doorway, whispering, refusing to meet his eyes. Foster turned to them, his voice steady. We'll need statements, all of you. Silence. Then, from the back of the crowd, a trembling voice broke through. "I saw it," said Selena, the neighbor who had been too afraid to speak for months. She clutched her shawl around her shoulders, eyes wet but resolute. "I've seen him hurt her before. I should have said something sooner." Foster nodded gently. "You're saying it now. That's what matters." Landon turned on her like a serpent. "You lying—" "Enough!" Foster barked, authority snapping through his tone like lightning. "You'll speak when spoken to." Selena's hands trembled, but her chin lifted. "She used to come to my window sometimes when it got bad. I'd hear her cry through the walls. I didn't think anyone would believe me. He was untouchable." Marcus's gaze flicked toward her, quiet gratitude passing between them. The truth was spreading now, one voice at a time, each word undoing years of silence. Foster turned to Justine. She sat on the staircase, Marcus's jacket still wrapped tightly around her, Teresa's small drawing clutched to her chest. Her eyes were swollen, her breath unsteady. "Do you want to give your statement?" Her fingers tightened around the drawing. "He hit me," she whispered. "Tonight. Before that. There were others. Bruises. Words that hurt worse." Her voice broke, but she forced herself to continue. "I stayed because I thought it was better than having nothing." Foster nodded slowly. "You don't have to stay anymore." Tears welled in her eyes, falling silently onto the crumpled paper in her hands. Teresa's drawing of a smiling mother beneath a sun. From outside, a small voice pierced the tension. "Mama!" The doors flew open, and Teresa burst inside, her tiny shoes splashing through the puddles. Her hair clung to her face, cheeks flushed, breath short from running. Justine's world shifted. She rose to her feet so fast that the jacket slid from her shoulders. "Teresa!" The girl ran into her arms, sobbing, clutching at her blouse. "They said you were hurt. I was so scared." Justine sank to her knees, holding her daughter close, her face pressed against Teresa's damp hair. The sound that left her throat wasn't a cry, not exactly. It was the sound of something breaking and mending at the same time. Marcus turned away, giving them space. The image of mother and child reunited under the flickering red-blue lights burned into his memory. It was the kind of moment that silenced even the strongest men. Landon's voice broke the hush, desperate and cornered. "You can't take me in for this. I'll have every one of you fired. Foster's hand came down heavy on his shoulder. "You're done, Creed. We've got witnesses, bruises, statements, and a video from one of your guests' phones." That last word hit like thunder. Landon's face went pale. "What video?" Selena spoke again, this time steadier. "The moment you hit her. The man beside me filmed it. He sent it to the police before you even noticed." Foster raised a brow. "You really should choose better friends." Landon stumbled back, shaking his head, rage giving way to disbelief. No, this isn't how it ends." "It is," Marcus said quietly from the doorway. His voice carried more weight than any badge. Landon turned, meeting Marcus's eyes, a final clash between pride and decency, arrogance and humanity. "You think you won?" Landon hissed. Marcus didn't blink. "I didn't come to win. I came to stop you." The words hung heavy in the air. Final, absolute. Foster motioned to his officers. "Take him." The cuffs clicked around Landon's wrists. His defiance melted into silence as they led him past the threshold, out into the storm that no longer roared but wept. For the first time, the lights of his mansion reflected not triumph, but exposure. Inside, the tension began to ease. One by one, the guests slipped away, their shoes echoing against the marble like ghosts of shame. Selena approached Justine, hesitating. "If you ever need somewhere to go, I'm next door. I'm sorry I didn't help sooner." Justine nodded, her voice a whisper. "You are now. That's enough." She turned back to Teresa. brushing her daughter's wet hair away from her face. The child's eyes searched hers. "Is he gone, Mama?" Justine swallowed hard, voice cracking but firm. "Yes, baby. He's gone." Teresa looked toward Marcus, who stood by the door, head bowed slightly, rain dripping from his hair. Her voice trembled as she said, "He helped you?" Justine followed her gaze. "Yes," she whispered. "He did." The little girl slipped from her mother's arms and ran to Marcus, throwing her tiny arms around his leg. "Thank you for saving my mama." Marcus froze, the kind of stillness that comes when a heart doesn't know what to do with gratitude. He placed a large, calloused hand on her shoulder. "She's the one who saved her. She just needed someone to see it." Teresa smiled faintly. "I think God sent you." He smiled, tired but genuine. "Maybe he sent both of us." The lights outside flickered once more, their glow washing over the broken glass on the floor. The pieces sparkled like stars caught between night and dawn. Justine looked around, at the ruin, the emptiness, the fragments of the life she'd survived. And yet, it no longer looked like destruction. It looked like truth, finally showing itself. She exhaled slowly, her hand resting on Teresa's back. "Sometimes," Marcus said quietly, eyes tracing the rising sun's reflection in the window, "silence is the loudest cry for help." Justine nodded, her voice breaking softly. "And sometimes, someone finally hears it." The sirens faded. The night began to breathe again, and for the first time, so did she. Morning came quietly, like the world itself had exhaled after holding its breath all night. The city below was still slick with rain, but here, inside the small safe-house apartment, there was peace. Fragile, trembling, but real. Steam curled from a chipped coffee mug on the counter. The curtains breathed with the slow rhythm of dawn, golden light filtering through the thin fabric and falling gently across the worn sofa where Teresa slept. Her tiny fingers clutched the sleeve of Marcus's leather jacket, still draped over her like a blanket. Every now and then she mumbled something in her dreams. Small words, half-formed, but they always sounded like Mama. Justine stood by the window, holding her mug in both hands. The scent of fresh coffee mingled with the faint metallic trace of the storm that had passed. Her reflection stared back at her, tired eyes, a bruise fading at the corner of her mouth, and something new beneath it all. Something she hadn't seen in years. Strength. She didn't hear the knock at first. It came soft, hesitant, like someone afraid to disturb the stillness. When she opened the door, Marcus stood there with a brown paper bag in his arms. He looked awkward, a giant of a man trying to be gentle in a world that had never asked him to be. "Brought supplies," he said simply. She blinked, surprised. "You didn't have to." "Didn't have to," he said with a faint grin. "Did anyway." He stepped inside, careful not to make noise. The wooden floor creaked under his boots. The bag landed softly on the table, filling the small kitchen with the scent of bread, milk, and soap. "Selena dropped some things off earlier," Justine said quietly, wrapping her fingers tighter around her mug. "She said the whole neighborhood's talking." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Good. Maybe next time someone won't wait so long to knock." Her lips twitched into the faintest smile. "You talk like a man who's seen too many storms." He leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. "Maybe I have." For a long time, the room was filled only with the sound of the ticking wall clock and Teresa's soft breathing. Then softly, Justine said, "Thank you. For last night. For everything." Marcus didn't look at her right away. "You don't owe me thanks. I just did what anyone decent would have done." Her voice trembled. "You and I both know that's not true." He looked up then, meeting her eyes. Something in his face shifted, the mask of composure cracking, if only slightly. He exhaled slowly, his tone low. "My sister," he began. Her name was Emily. Justine froze. the name hitting her like a whisper from fate. She was quiet, he continued, his eyes drifting toward the window. Didn't tell anyone what he did to her until it was too late. I was a firefighter back then. I thought I knew what saving someone meant, but I didn't save her. His words hung in the air, not sharp, not loud, just unbearably honest. Justine's throat tightened. Marcus. He shook his head, forcing a small smile. It's fine. That was a long time ago. But last night, when I saw you standing there, scared and still trying to protect that man from yourself, I saw her, and I wasn't about to fail again. She placed her mug on the table, stepping closer. The distance between them shrank until the air itself felt warmer. You didn't fail. You saved us. He looked at her then, really looked at her. For the first time, there was something almost peaceful in his eyes. You saved yourself, Justine. I just kicked down the door. She laughed softly through her tears, brushing them away with the back of her hand. And what now? You ride off, and we go back to pretending people like him don't exist? Marcus leaned his weight against the counter, eyes softening. You don't have to pretend anymore. You're free now. Her voice cracked. Freedom feels strange. He nodded slowly. It always does at first. Hours passed like quiet music. Marcus fixed a loose curtain rod, replaced a flickering bulb, and filled the silence with stories. Stories of the road, of small towns and strangers who became family for a night. Justine listened, half smiling, half wondering how someone so rough could speak with such gentleness. When he handed her a folded newspaper later, her chest tightened again. The headline read, Biker Stops Millionaire's Assault. Community Demands Reform. Her photo was there too, small and blurry, taken as she stood outside the mansion clutching Teresa. She looked both broken and unbreakable. Guess you're famous now, Marcus said quietly. She shook her head. I don't want fame. He smiled faintly. Then just take the hope. The rest will pass. From the couch, Teresa stirred, blinking groggily. Mama? Justine rushed over, sitting beside her. I'm here, baby. The little girl smiled, her small hand clutching the jacket still covering her. Is he gone? Justine brushed her hair back gently. He's gone, sweetheart. We're safe. Teresa nodded sleepily, tugging the jacket closer. Smells like the road. Marcus chuckled from across the room. That's called freedom, kiddo. Her eyes fluttered closed again, and within moments, she was asleep, one hand still wrapped around the leather sleeve. Justine turned to him. She likes you. Kids usually do, he said softly. They haven't learned to judge yet. She looked down at her daughter, her voice barely above a whisper. She's been through too much for her age. Marcus walked closer, his tone gentle but sure. You both have, but you'll heal, bit by bit. Pain doesn't vanish. It just stops owning you. Her eyes glistened again. You talk like a man who's done his healing. He shook his head. Nah, still learning. But I figure if we share what we've learned, it hurts less. They stood there for a moment, two survivors surrounded by the scent of coffee, rain, and redemption. As daylight climbed higher, Justine walked him to the door. Will you come back? She asked softly. He looked at her, then at the sleeping child on the couch. You'll see me again. Something in his tone told her it was a promise, not a courtesy. When he stepped outside, the sunlight caught the edges of his jacket as he pulled it on, gleaming like armor that had seen too much but still carried warmth. He turned once more before leaving, nodding toward the window where Justine stood. Don't let the fear come back. You've got something stronger now. What's that? She asked, voice trembling. Belief, he said simply. And with that, he walked toward his motorcycle, the quiet growl of the engine blending with the sound of wind through the trees. Justine watched until he vanished from sight, her reflection faint in the glass. Not the woman who trembled in a mansion of mirrors, but one standing in the light of her own beginning. It started with a single clip, shaky, grainy, filmed through rain and fear. Teresa's small voice echoed through it. "The millionaire is hitting my mama." The world stopped. By sunrise, the video had spread like fire through every corner of the city. News anchors whispered her name. Strangers wept over breakfast. For the first time, people didn't look away. The city that once turned its music up to drown out the cries was finally listening. Justine watched it unfold from a small cafe window, her hands wrapped around a cup that had gone cold long ago. On the muted television above the counter, a reporter stood in front of the mansion gates, now sealed by yellow tape. The caption beneath read, "Mother and child safe. Community demands action." She couldn't believe it. The same city that ignored her bruises now wanted her story. Outside, the morning light spilled across the streets like forgiveness. Marcus's motorcycle rumbled into view, stopping at the curb. He removed his helmet, his eyes meeting hers through the glass, steady, patient, protective. When he stepped inside, the bell above the door jingled softly. "You're famous," he said with a crooked smile. "Don't," she whispered, shaking her head. "I'm not the story." He tilted his head. "No, but you're the reason it changed." She didn't answer. Her gaze fell back to the screen, where the anchor spoke about voices on wheels, a biker-led outreach movement Marcus had founded overnight. They rode through alleys, motels, and shelters, their leather jackets now marked not with flames or skulls, but a single symbol, a small, open ear. Their mission was simple: to listen where others wouldn't. By afternoon, a crowd had gathered outside the Women's Center, the same one that once turned Justine away because there were too many cases. Now, banners fluttered in the wind. No more silence. Her cry saved us all. Justine stood at the edge of it, Teresa's small hand clutched tightly in hers. The little girl wore her mother's old scarf as a makeshift cape, chin lifted like a tiny warrior who didn't know she'd started a revolution. Selena waved from across the crowd, her eyes bright with pride. Foster stood beside her, uniform sharp, but his smile softer than Justine remembered. The community wasn't perfect, but for once it was trying. A journalist approached Justine with a microphone. "How does it feel?" she asked. "To know your daughter's voice woke up an entire city." Justine blinked, the question catching her off guard. Her voice trembled. "It feels like hope got a second chance." The reporter nodded, but her words were drowned by applause rippling through the crowd. Marcus leaned against his bike nearby, watching quietly, arms crossed. He didn't need the spotlight. The pride in his eyes said everything. When Justine finally stepped up to the small podium, the world seemed to hush. Cameras flashed. Wind tugged at her hair. She spoke not as a victim, but as someone who had walked through fire and come out whole. "I used to think silence was strength," she began. "That if I endured quietly, I was being brave. But silence doesn't protect you. It isolates you. And sometimes, the loudest cry for help isn't loud at all. It's a whisper that someone finally decides to hear." The crowd listened, really listened. Her eyes found Marcus among them, his nod small but powerful. She continued, her voice gaining strength. "My daughter was the one who spoke, but it was all of you who answered. And if one voice can save one life, imagine what all of us could do together." The next week, the mayor announced the opening of the Haven House, a new community center for women and children starting over. They offered Justine the role of managing director. She hesitated at first. "I don't have experience," she told Marcus. He smiled, hands in his jacket pockets. "You've got what they don't teach. You know how it feels to break, and how to build again." So she accepted. On the first morning, the walls smelled of paint and fresh beginnings. Volunteers hammered nails and lifted boxes. Teresa ran through the halls with a paper badge that read, "Little Helper." Marcus climbed up a ladder outside, repairing a section of the roof that leaked after the rain. The sunlight gleamed off the metal sheets, warm and forgiving. "Hey!" Justine called up to him, shading her eyes. "You don't have to fix everything, you know." He grinned down. "Too late. It's what I do." She crossed her arms, smiling despite herself. "You started a movement, Marcus. You could be anywhere right now." He paused, tightening a bolt before glancing at her. "Nowhere else I'd rather be." Their eyes met, hers still cautious, his steady as ever. She looked around at the laughter, the music, the sound of hammers and hope. "It's strange," she said quietly, "how something so painful could turn into something beautiful." Marcus descended the ladder slowly, his boots landing soft on the gravel. He handed her a nail gun, his tone warm and teasing. "You helped make it beautiful." Her smile faltered, replaced by something deeper. Gratitude. Maybe awe. "No," she whispered. "You listened when no one else did." He looked at her for a long moment before replying, voice low. "You changed the world just by crying the truth." Her eyes shimmered, and she shook her head. "No, Marcus. By listening, you did." They stood there, two souls rebuilt from fire and fear. As the sunlight broke through the last of the gray clouds, Teresa's laughter rang out from the doorway, echoing through the yard. "Mama, Mr. Marcus, come see my painting." They turned to look. On the wall beside the entrance, the little girl had painted 3 stick figures holding hands under a bright, wide sky. Above them, in careful letters, she had written one word: home. Justine pressed a hand to her mouth. Tears slid down, but they weren't sad this time. They were release, a full circle drawn in light. Marcus slipped his arm around her shoulders, not as a savior, not as a symbol, but as a friend who understood the cost of healing. And together they stood before that wall, watching the city that once looked away, now painting itself into something kinder. The morning light stretched softly across the cafe's windows, spilling gold over the small wooden tables and the scent of pancakes and cinnamon. Outside, motorcycles gleamed in the sun, lined up like loyal sentinels, their chrome catching the brightness of a new day. Inside, laughter hummed. Easy, warm, alive. The kind of laughter that only comes when pain has finally been given its peace. Justine poured syrup over Teresa's pancakes, pretending not to notice the little hand sneaking an extra strawberry from the bowl. "Mama, look!" Teresa grinned, holding up a drawing she'd been working on. Crayons scattered everywhere, reds, yellows, and blues like fragments of joy reborn. On the paper, beneath a bright yellow sun, stood 3 figures: a woman with a soft smile, a man with broad shoulders and a jacket full of patches, and a little girl between them, her arms stretched wide. Beside them were 2 motorcycles, one silver, one black, parked under a sign that read, "The Haven Cafe." Justine leaned closer, her voice soft. "Who's that handsome man with the big bike?" Teresa giggled, lowering her voice like it was a secret. "That's Mr. Marcus. You can tell because of his jacket." Marcus, sitting a few tables away, looked up at the sound of his name. He had a mug of black coffee in one hand and a newspaper folded neatly beside him. He raised an eyebrow. "Am I being talked about again?" Teresa turned, holding up her drawing with both hands. "I made this for you." He rose slowly, a grin tugging at his lips. "Well, that's the best kind of trouble, isn't it?" He crouched beside her chair, examining the picture like it was sacred art. His rough fingers brushed against the paper edges, careful not to smudge the colors. "It's perfect," he said. "You even got my bike right. That's talent." She beamed. "You can keep it. I wrote something too." At the top of the drawing, in uneven letters, she had written, "My family." For a moment, no one spoke. The air seemed to hold its breath. Marcus blinked, eyes softening. He reached into his leather vest and carefully tucked the drawing into an inside pocket, next to his badge-shaped patch that read, "Voices on Wheels." "Sometimes," he said quietly, voice rough around the edges, "angels ride loud." Justine froze, the words hitting her deeper than she expected. She looked at him, at this man who had ridden out of the storm and somehow stayed. His presence had become a constant rhythm in their lives now, helping fix the center's plumbing, showing up for Teresa's school art show, teaching her to balance on a little bicycle with training wheels that roared like freedom. Her lips trembled into a smile. "And sometimes," she whispered back, "salvation wears leather." Marcus laughed softly, rubbing the back of his neck. "Guess that makes us quite the pair, huh?" "More like a miracle," she replied. He met her gaze, steady, gentle, full of quiet understanding. There was no need for more words. Everything that needed to be said already lived between them. The cafe had become their Sunday ritual, a gathering place for survivors, riders, and wanderers who found belonging in each other's stories. The walls were lined with framed photographs of the Voices on Wheels crew, the Haven House volunteers, and the first candlelight vigil they'd held for victims who never got to speak. Foster sometimes stopped by in uniform, joking about how coffee diplomacy kept the peace better than most laws. Selena managed the front counter on weekends, her laughter always the loudest in the room. Today, the chatter was light, people sharing plans, teasing, living. As Marcus stood by the window, sunlight caught the dust motes in the air. He watched Teresa helping the waitress carry napkins, her ponytail bouncing. She had her mother's resilience, her father's stubborn spark, and a courage all her own. Justine joined him quietly, her coffee cup steaming in her hands. "Hard to believe it's only been 6 months," she murmured. "Feels like a lifetime ago." Marcus nodded, eyes still on Teresa. "You both changed a lot more than your own story." She tilted her head, smiling softly. "We just told the truth." "That's what changes the world," he said simply. Outside, the street came alive with the sound of engines revving. A line of bikers rolled past, their jackets all marked with the same small symbol, the open ear. Listening saved lives. Marcus watched them go, a faint smile tugging at his mouth. Guess the city finally found its rhythm. Justine leaned against the counter, watching him. "And you? Still restless?" He shook his head. "Not anymore. For the first time, I've got somewhere worth parking." Her laugh was soft but full, the kind that makes the heart ache in the best way. Teresa ran up then, holding another drawing, this one of the cafe itself, with sunlight bursting from every window. "I'm making this one for the wall," she said proudly. Marcus bent down, serious as ever. "Then it goes right in the center, okay? So everyone who walks in remembers what love looks like." The girl nodded solemnly, and Justine's eyes filled with tears she didn't bother to hide. Later, as the sun dipped low, the cafe doors opened and a cool breeze swept through, fluttering napkins and laughter alike. The world outside glittered. Puddles turned to mirrors, engines hummed like lullabies. Marcus put on his gloves, preparing to leave for a ride with the club. Justine stepped closer. "Be careful out there." He smiled, his eyes lingering on her face, memorizing it in the light. "Always am." Then, before walking out, he touched the spot over his vest pocket, where Teresa's drawing rested like a heartbeat. "I've got Lucky Charms now." She reached up, brushing her thumb over the edge of his collar. "Don't forget, the world listens better when someone like you speaks." He paused, his voice low. "And it heals faster when someone like you forgives." Their eyes held for one long, unbroken moment, the kind of silence that carried meaning instead of absence. He turned toward the door, the wind catching the corner of his jacket as he stepped into the sunlight. Teresa waved from inside, shouting over the hum of engines, "Come back soon, Mr. Marcus." He glanced over his shoulder, smiling. Wouldn't miss Sunday breakfast for anything. The bikes roared to life, and the sound rolled down the street, not as noise, but as music. Final narration, soft cinematic tone. The night she cried for help became the morning the city remembered compassion. In a world too used to noise, it took a child's trembling voice, a mother's quiet courage, and a biker's unspoken promise to remind us, sometimes the loudest engines carry the gentlest hearts. The camera would fade slowly, the cafe bathed in amber light, Teresa's drawings framed on the wall, Justine wiping her hands on an apron, smiling through peaceful tears, and Marcus riding into the horizon, his jacket fluttering, the word voices shining beneath the sun. What does strength mean to you now? The silence you survived, or the voice you finally found?